Hello denizens of the internet, this is Kira Una coming to you today with the final installment of the Tortoise Brooch Challenge. Earlier this year, at the beginning of the year, I had made the challenge for anyone out there, regardless of what materials, to make a tortoise brooch. What is a tortoise brooch, you ask? It is a decorative piece essentially meant to hold the straps of an apron dress that were typically worn, as best as we can understand it, from people who lived during the Viking Age. I have had multiple tries of trying to get this done. In my case, it is out of a belt buckle that I bought from a leather supply store, taken the part of the buckle off, and I'm using kilt pins or skirt pins that unbuckle, and I did shorten them here, and I essentially glued them on, and then we have the final product after doing some decoration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the final process of how I finished these off. Let's get cracking. Please stick with me on this ride. I'm sure many of you may have seen my video of my epic fail of trying to solder my tortoise brooch together. Let's just say the soldering didn't work. So we're going to try a different approach. For anybody who's following along, today is September the 3rd. This is the same day that I put up the video for my failure of trying to solder this thing together. If you want to, I would highly recommend that you watch it first. Hopefully everything that I'm doing will remain in focus. So, we are going with plan B. Now, I apologize for the noise because the cicadas are in full force today. It is the end of the proverbial summer, which means they will scream into the void until it gets cooler, and then that's where spooky season and Halloween and all the cooler vibes and pumpkin spice lattes and all that sort of good stuff comes out. So what we are doing is, as I mentioned in my last video, I am more familiar with epoxy, except I have never used metal epoxy before. It is saying that it is corrosive, but I have handled this before. I know that I can handle it relatively safely. It's essentially to glue metal together. So preferably don't do this with your bare hands. Make sure you have some cleanup material handy. I've got cardboard here. I've got paper that I'm going to be using this to mix on. So essentially everything at the end of the day will be disposable, except for the projects I'm working on. So I'm going to cut this out of the box and get this prepped to be usable. Where's the lid? Okay. So essentially this is a two-part epoxy. So you got part A and part B. So we have the epoxy and the hardener. Essentially, like, think of this as kind of like resin in a way. So I am working outdoors to avoid any fumes. So and this set, and like all two-part epoxy tubes like this, come with the lid, which sits in here. It's very similar to the 5-minute epoxy, which I have used in the past for various other projects. Now, I'm going to have to work relatively fast or do this in two parts, because not only do I have the tortoise brooches, but because I was also trying to do my sewing for Cape Timber from last year, and trying to set this up on my desk, my sewing bird broke right at the join. So anybody who sees this specific sewing bird online and they say it's 100% like solid brass, it is not solid brass. I had this confirmed by another crafter who's a little bit more familiar with metalwork, and they confirmed it is not brass because the inner part is sandy. So that leads me to believe that, based on what they said, that this is just heat formed with something on the inside. So it's brass colored, but it's not necessarily brass all the way through. Now, what I've done, and this is my hopeful ditch effort because I don't know how to do welding. I'm not going to try the solder thing again because it obviously failed last time. But I have taken a crap ton of copper wire, essentially to hold it in place and hopefully reinforce it a little bit. The break is like right here. So I'm going to essentially epoxy around this whole thing and just build it up so it's thick, to hopefully reinforce this so I can actually make it usable again, because make do and mend, I'm making do with what I got, so this is my next best effort. Hopefully this works, because I want this to last. The whole point of me buying this was to make it last a long time and make it usable, because I do have a disability right now where my shoulder is not doing the best. I can hold stuff that's fairly light, but trying to move heavy fabrics through a sewing machine is a little bit hard, so this is essentially supposed to help take part of the load off. But it broke while I'm trying to attach it to my desk with this bit. So I have to be careful to not get any epoxy in the threading of this, otherwise it'll make it absolutely useless. I have to make sure that I get all the epoxy in here. Like, essentially I'm not going to epoxy over top of this bit. I'm going to epoxy from like here and down over in this joint on both sides. The box is essentially to prevent anything in the breeze that might be flying around from getting stuck to the epoxy as it's drying. And it's also just sort of as a splash barrier, because I don't want to get any epoxy on my balcony. So let's get started. Pull this out. I have read all the warning instructions. It's almost exactly the same thing as regular 5-minute epoxy, which I'm familiar with, so that's no biggie. And to make sure that I can get into the nitty-gritties, I've got some toothpicks. This paper plate is not only appropriate since it's the beginning of September, but it's also like almost everybody I know is getting into the Halloween vibe already. So I'm here for it. I like the Halloween and I like the cheesy Halloween stuff, so enjoy the kooky, campy vibes as we go in. So I'm gonna cut this open, pop this out. Might need an X-Acto knife, but I'm gonna use my popsicle stick, which I probably got from the dollar store, and my wooden toothpicks, and mix this up on the plate and then apply generously.
One week later.
I was able to tighten it to the desk without it breaking right at the joint. It still feels a little bit rubbery. It's been sitting like resting and curing for like a week, but it's not going anywhere, so that's always a bonus.
2 weeks later.
And I think we've done it! So, I can open it, I can close it, minimal movage, and, well, I mean, this is going to be a little bit movey because it's a little rubbery. This one has a little less of the goop, so, like the metal epoxy, so let's see. Hey, I think we've got it. And the bonus is they're both equally off-center, but they're also facing inward, if that makes sense. I didn't do that intentionally, but I'm kind of glad it worked out that way. So one is a lefty and one's a righty. So now, now that the excitement is over and that, well, the excitement is increasing because now we gotta decorate the darn things. I have also realized they're not very even, but you know what? That's okay. We're going more functionality than form, as I mentioned earlier, so that's fine. I don't know how I'm going to decorate this. I'm going to have to start looking up some finds to see what kind of decoration we're looking at here. I will be using gold foil on these. I've never used gold foil before. It looks like fun. So I've got to figure, like, I've got some essentially aquarium glue, so then that way I can embed and glue on all of the beads or anything that I'm going to do wire-wise or whatever onto here as decor, wait for it to dry, and then I'm going to gold leaf it, and then I'm going to Mod Podge it just so then that way it doesn't come off, because these are supposed to be functional but like hard wearing but also decorative, and I don't want the decor. Oh, and you can see me in my camera. Hello. I don't want the decor to come off. Like, I don't want it popping off anything as I move around or do daily activities or whatever. These are probably not going to be for daily wear because I've got the other bronze ones. These are going to be more for decoration and proof of concept. Much like the Mythbusters, you know, this is the mess around and find out stage. The difference is I'm documenting the whole thing instead of just messing around and not screwing around, so. And to quote Adam Savage, the difference between science and screwing around is writing it down. In my case, it's documentation of the process. I'm gonna do some research and see what I can find.
Later.
So we have the tortoise brooches here, and as you can see, this is the one that I failed on soldering, but I glued it down with the metal epoxy, and this is the one that I didn't, but still managed to make it successful. And they are both able to be opened and closed. They are not a super sharp pin, and I also got a little bit of the glue on the rod part, but that's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give these a little bit of a cleanup just to try and remove any of the oiling that happened during my attempt at trying to clean this up. And I'm going to use just a little bit of acetone. Well, I mean, I do my nails, so it's no big shock that I have a fairly decent sized bottle of it. And once I have all of the surfaces covered up and dried, because it's the best way to get any kind of glue to stick to anything that's shiny like this. If you don't, it won't stick. Much kind of like nail polish, actually. And then what I'm going to do is I have some beads here. They're not super fancy because it doesn't have to be for what I have planned. And I have my stash of many other beads. And just in case anybody who is wondering, it is a Vegemite jar. They make fantastic storage jars for the size. So I have my beads. I'm gonna tack them down with some super glue. This is off-brand dollar store. It does the job. Super glue. Then I've got another glue here by LePage. Not sponsored. That is essentially intended for extreme repair. This one is supposed to be waterproof, heat resistant, and everything else. So I'm hoping once I have my decorations tacked into place on these, then I can go over it with the super sticky glue to make sure it's really stays put, because it is meant for glass and sinks and things. So I'd imagine that there would be a little bit of like metal that it may need to hold together. This is to provide it a little bit of durability, so then that way the decorations don't fall off. Because after looking at some of the extant tortoise brooches that people have found at various finds, there seems to be a common theme where there's dots in between lining for the decoration that is raised up off the edge in sort of like a diamond-shaped pattern almost. So what I might do is I might actually use some copper wire, glue that down as well to sort of form, like just cut it into even strips and then put it between the beads. So then that way it is reminiscent of most of the extant tortoise brooches within a historical good enoughness of the patterning. If that doesn't work, if it looks like not the best, I may take some of the copper wire. Again, sticking with the copper theme. but I may do some Celtic knots, and I do have a pegboard specifically for this particular reason for jewelry, because I've done wire work at some point. So what I might do is I'll use that to make a Celtic design, glue that down, and then we have a slightly unorthodox medium that I've always wanted to try to coat it with, because I'm not going to leave these silver. I have never worked with gold leaf before. I'm anticipating on that I will probably get gold leaf everywhere, but you know, that's how I kind of roll. I just get stuff everywhere. Not without any fault, because sometimes, you know, crafting can get a little messy. But let me clean these off and start gluing things down. I will copy this one onto here. They're gonna be sisters, not twins. Let this dry for a little while. I may need to find some way of daubing the glue on there so it doesn't move. I'll find something to attach more glue so it stays put. Have to find a way to do this outside so I don't, you know, die. But back to gluing the rest of the beads on here. So this is the kind of patterning I'm gonna go with. We will see how this goes.
Several days later.
Alright, so these have dried. They're pretty stable, even though there's not a heck of a lot of glue on here. But we've come to the sticky wicket, or the lack of sticky wicket in this glue conundrum. Because I read the back of that Stick and Seal Extreme Adhesive stuff, and it says that the glue, once it's dry, is not paintable. That could cause a problem if it doesn't stick to the gold foil. What I'm wondering, what if I Mod Podge this sucker? Because I do have outdoor Mod Podge. My original plan was to glue it down so it's a little bit better, and then use the gold foil over top of it, and then use the Mod Podge over top of that to protect the gold foil so that it doesn't come off, or at least not rub off too easily. So what if I Mod Podge it, let it dry, gold foil it, and then let the Mod Podge over top of that dry? It won't look as metallic, but I'm hoping it'll at least be shiny. Like, I have a gold leaf sealant. Like, it is, I want to wear these outdoors at some point for like a fair day or something if I ever go to one, because I know that Mod Podge can leave. Here's the bit of the problem. Mod Podge can leave streaks. This will not be smooth in any term of the condition, but it does have. If it's done properly, it has a bit of a rough texture to it sometimes, especially if it's like the glow-in-the-dark variety or if it's used on fabric. I don't want to use fabric on this, or at least not if I can avoid it. I need to think on this. Alright, so I may have come up with a solution for this, but whether I actually have like varnish for this, I don't know. I have to look on my shelf to see what I have. I do have like a workable fixative. So essentially it's a fixative for things like paper and such that stick things to things so that they don't smudge, but you can still draw over top of them. I might use that, but it's not ideal. I don't know. Let me see what I have. Let me quickly look and see what I have. Well, I was certainly hoping I had something. This isn't quite what I had in mind. Man, oh man, my camera lens is being difficult today. Alright, so I was able to find this. What this is it's a lacquer for Fimo, or Sculpey. It will have a very shiny, glossy, smooth coating. This might do. I'm gonna probably put the Mod Podge on. I'm going to use the outdoor stuff because I know that stuff is more sticky. And then I'm going to use the gold foil, use the water adhesive for that, and then I'm going to try sealing it with this and see how that goes. Because Mod Podge itself is water soluble, so that won't be too bad. And then I might even be able to tack this on tomorrow, and we'll see how that works out. Because I want to make sure the Mod Podge has a really good time to dry. I will see you probably tomorrow morning.
The next day.
Alright, so we have... It's still a little sticky. It usually takes like a couple of days to fully dry, but I'm being a little impatient, but that's okay. You know, I'll live with it. So what we have for this adhesive, Speedball, for anybody who is not familiar with Speedball, they're essentially a calligraphy, and I believe they also have like other like manuscript sort of things for anybody who does paper things that are historically reenacting, like for the SCA or what have you. Speedball is a company that essentially sells calligraphy pens, calligraphy inks, that sort of thing. And this is the adhesive for, and I'm going to use an off-brand gold foil, imitation gold. I have no idea what this gold leaf is actually made of, if it's actually gold or if it's something that's just really fine. This is what I'm going to be applying onto the tortoise brooches once it's sticky enough. And I've seen it done. I'm going to be saving the leaf and putting anything left over that's brushed off, which is what the paper is for, into a plastic jar. Because I don't want this going to waste. I want to keep as much of it as I can. Because if I can use the same stuff later for gilding something, that would be very helpful. And I'm probably going to have a lot left because I'm only going to need really like maybe 2 or 3 sheets, or at least I'm hoping. Now, to use this, I need to brush it on. And I have like a not very expensive kind of dollar store brush, so if it gets trashed, no big deal. But I also have a cup of water because this stuff is water soluble. So the instructions said I have to brush this on, wait for it to go from milky to clear, and then that's when I can adhere the gold leaf to this. And I have a dry brush that I can use to get like tamp it down and get it all into the cracks and stuff, so hopefully that'll stay on. And then once that's all dry, I'll be using the sealer. I know it's not perfect, but it'll seal it in. And then hopefully after that I can go in with the glaze. I think I have enough here that it should be enough to cover both of these, and then I'll probably run out. And then I'll have to put this somewhere to dry for the next few days. The sealant is a lot more smelly, and it does say to brush lightly and not too much. So I will do that, let it dry, and then I'll have to look into coating it again because I don't want this coming off, and with wear and tear it probably will, but still. We'll get into brushing this down.
Several days later.
There's a couple of spots where it seems like it's tearing, but I'm gonna live with it just because I'm not gonna fuss with it much more. This has been drying for like it's been at least 2 days since I did the last coat on this. So I'm gonna use the Fimo lacquer thing. Put it this way, Fimo and polymer clay is essentially exactly that. It is a plastic type of clay that once you bake it, it hardens. And it's not porous. This is supposed to sit on top of something that's not porous. Guess what else is not porous? Metals. So hopefully this will work. So we'll see if it does. Let's get this painted. And here we have the final tortoise brooch. Now, some of it had greened a little bit after the several coatings of the adhesive and the sealer and then the coating that goes on top. I suspect that it may have to do with some of the pieces are copper and it's just oxidizing, but that's okay because it gives it a little bit of slight authenticity in a way. Not necessarily historically accurate, but you know what? It's good enough that I don't think they'll look that out of place, which is a good thing. Now, I don't have an apron dress to actually wear with these because that is still a project in the works. So I don't have an apron dress yet. I do have some linen that I had plans to make one out of, so I might do that at some point. I am also working on a shift to go under it, a plain cream linen, not dyed or anything. There's the backside of the one that I failed at soldering, and the one that I didn't solder. And I got some gold leaf on the back, but that's okay. It's mainly because the glue it's got like a very slightly, it's not as tacky as it was before, but it's pretty solid. I hope you enjoyed this little adventure in crafting. This was a long one, several parts, but I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoy, and I would like to see in the comments down below, or if anybody actually has made any on their socials, please hashtag me on YouTube or at me on YouTube, and then hashtag the challenge. So with that being said, that's all for today, folks.